So now that you've got your cables out of your shifter, if you're replacing the cables, you might as well go for it and replace the housing as well. I'm just going to go ahead and release the cable from this shifter, and the housing on these shifters falls right away. For the brake housing, you need to unwrap the bars. I've unwrapped the handlebar on this side. A lot of times when you do this, the bar tape is going to become damaged, as it did when I was unwrapping these, and so it doesn't hurt if you're picking up cables and housing to go ahead and pick up an extra roll or two of tape as well. Plus fresh tape is just great, let's face it. To get this brake housing off of here, it's taped to the bar under the tape, so I'm just going to use a razor blade and cut that tape away. And with that housing free, once I release the brake cable from this side, I'm going to be able to just pull that brake housing right out of the back of the shifter, just like that. Now this bar is completely ready to be re-cabled and housed on this side. Hopefully you've been saving your housing as you've been pulling it off. It's usually when your housing is installed initially, unless it was very poorly assembled, it was cut to a specific length for your bike. Now when you're doing new housing and cables, your housing and cables will oftentimes come in a package like this, where you have sort of one big spool of housing in there. And the cables, you'll cut all the way at the end of the process, but the housing, you're going to need to cut it kind of as you go. So, we'll crack open our brand new package of cables and housing here and show you how to go about that. So this is the Clark's brake cable package here, and cables are road and mountain specific, so make sure that when you're buying brake cables, you buy road brake cables if you're doing a road bike, which has these little mushroom-shaped ends on them, and make sure, and if you're doing a mountain cable replacement, it'll have sort of a little hockey puck on the end of there. Shifters are shifters, mountain or road, it doesn't matter either way. In this package, you've got everything that you need. You've got the cable, the housing, and also all of the little ends and fittings and fancy bits that we'll cover here in just a second. Because you were smart and you saved all of the housing that came off of your old bike, you can use it to measure and cut the new housing. So, for instance, if this was the piece of housing that you just pulled out of your road shifter, and you want another piece that's exactly the same length, I'm just going to take my new housing, line it up, get it down there to that end, and clip it. I'm not the world's best, most organized person, but this is one time that you're not going to want to get things mixed up, especially if your old housing looks decent on the outside. It can be easy to confuse them. Once you've cut and measured your new piece, I would just go ahead and discard that old piece. You're not going to need it anymore. With your new housing cut and matched to the length, the next step is going to be to go ahead and put some housing ends on. And this is another stage where if you're replacing your old housing, it's pretty easy just to follow the template that the old housing set. So in the case of the housing that I pulled off of here, really only one end of it had a little ferrule on it, which is this little cap. The other end, the end that goes into the Shimano shifters, doesn't usually need one. I'm just going to clean my cut up here a little bit on this cable and make sure it's nice and open. Sometimes when you're cutting a piece of cable, you might have to cut it once or twice just to make sure that you can really see down inside there, so it's pretty easy to feed the cable in. Once that's done, I'm just going to apply the ferrule to the outside. It doesn't have to sit on there very tight. Once the cables run through, the tension of the cable will hold the whole system together. But if you're worried about losing it, you can just take your cable cutters and crimp that ferrule a little bit. Just a tiny bit though. You don't want to slow the movement of the cable at all. And that way it'll stay on there pretty snugly. Then you can go ahead and reinstall. A lot of times I'll like to start reinstalling by running the cable through and then feeding the housing over the cable. If you run the housing in first, sometimes it can be hard to kind of stab the end of that housing with the cable as it's feeding through the shifter and then around the bar. So I'm going to pop my cables out here. A lot of times when you're buying a package of cables like this, one will be shorter than the other. I'm sure you can figure this out on your own, but the short one is the front, and then one is way, way, way longer, and that one is the rear cable, of course. So in this case, I'm working with the left shifter, so I'm going to do the front brake here in the United States. You're going to take your new cable. I'm going to feed it right back into that shifter. Right into that same, you got this little rotating piece in there. I'm going to feed that housing right in through there. And sometimes you'll have to poke around a little bit before it finds its way out. But generally speaking, the shifter is made so the cable will find its way out. So usually, you only have to poke around a couple times before you find it. Once your cable's through, I like to put a little tension on the cable and squeeze the brake just to make sure that everything's locked in place normally. If you squeeze the brake and nothing happens, you don't feel it pulling on the cable, then something's not quite lined up and you might need to push it back out and try your feed through again. In this case, it went in right the first time, thank goodness, because I'm on camera. So I'm going to take the housing that we've already cut and feed the cable into the housing. Get that housing lined right back up on the handlebar. And in this case, I would pull that old tape off of there and just grab some new electrical tape or whatever tape. It's going to be under your handlebars. Nobody's going to see it, so it doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to hold the cable in place while you tape your bars. So yeah, go ahead and throw some tape on there and secure your bars, and then it's just a matter of reattaching and then readjusting your cable. If you're not matching up to old housing and you want to make sure that your housing is the right length on your bike, I just did the front brake, so it's not quite as big of a deal with the front brake, but with your rear brake and with both of your shifter housings, it's really important to make sure that you get the right length. You have a little bit of room for flexibility, but what you want to make sure you can do is you want to make sure that your handlebar will turn completely in both directions so that it doesn't hinder your steering as you're riding your bike. If your housing is cut too short, then you might find that if you have to make a sudden right turn that you're shifting at the same time. That's not ideal. So if you're measuring your own housing, usually I'll just run the housing from the brake or shifter down to that first stop, turn the handlebar all the way to one side to make sure there's plenty of length there, and then cut it off. And the same is true of the rear brake as well. That way you've got plenty of flexibility there as you need it. Every frame is different. This frame has easily accessible stops up here and externally run cables, but some of your more modern road frames or mountain frames will have internally run cables. That's a whole nother ball game, but basically you just kind of want to follow the template of the cables that you're pulling out as you're feeding the new cables back in. Then once your new cables are run into the bike and you've got them reattached in your derailleurs or brakes, whichever it is you're replacing, then you're ready to retune, rewrap your handlebars, and hit the road with some crisp, newly adjusted shifting or some much more functional brakes. As always, this is a very complicated process, so if you have any questions, feel free to call your Spin Doctor Tech Support Services, or better yet, swing by your local performance bicycle shop and let them help you out.